A wolf found a baby alone in the snow. But it wasn't an abandoned baby. Maria Conceição Silva never imagined that at 72 years old, she would live through the most distressing day of her life. The blizzard that hit the mountains of Rio Grande do Sul in the early hours of that July morning brought with it a mystery that would shake her entire family and reveal secrets kept for decades. It was the persistent howling of Lua, the dark-coated German shepherd everyone mistook for a wolf, that woke the farmer before dawn. The animal was desperately scratching at the house door, something it had never done in its 8 years of life. "What is it, girl?" whispered Maria, still wearing the blue flannel robe her daughter had given her for her last birthday. Lua ran toward the small wooden bridge that crossed the stream at the back of the property. There, pulling a small makeshift sled made of old planks and rope, was the discovery that would change everything. A baby of a few months wrapped in a light blue blanket was sleeping soundly despite the biting cold. Its rosy cheeks contrasted with the snow beginning to pile up around the rustic sled. "My God in heaven," murmured Maria, approaching carefully. "Where did this child come from?" Lua wagged her tail and looked toward the dirt road as if expecting someone to appear. The dog's behavior left Maria even more confused. It was as if the animal knew exactly what it was doing. Maria picked up the baby in her arms and felt her heart tighten. The child was warm and well cared for, clearly not having been exposed to the cold for long. The blanket wrapped around it was of good quality, hand-embroidered with little yellow flowers. "Don't cry, my angel," she whispered, while walking quickly back to the house. "Grandma Maria will take care of you." Inside the cozy kitchen, with the wood stove warming the room, Maria examined the child more closely. It was a boy. He seemed to be between 4 and 6 months old. He was clean and obviously well fed. There were no signs of mistreatment or abandonment. This left her even more intrigued. Who would leave such a well-cared-for baby alone in the snow? And how did Lua know where to find him? The kitchen phone rang exactly at 6 in the morning, making Maria jump in fright. On the other end of the line, the desperate voice of Carmem, her neighbor from the property next door. "Maria, for God's sake, did you see anything strange tonight? My grandson is missing." Carmem's voice was choked with tears. "Little Pedro, 5 months old. Patricia just woke up, and he wasn't in his crib." Maria's blood ran cold. She looked at the baby sleeping peacefully in her arms and felt a mix of relief and confusion take hold of her chest. "Carmem, calm down. The boy is here with me. He's fine. He's safe." "What do you mean he's there?" Carmem's voice rose an octave. "How did he end up at your house? It's a long story. Bring Patricia here, but come slowly because of the snow. And Carmem, bring warm clothes for the baby." While waiting for the 2 women to arrive, Maria couldn't stop thinking about Lua's strange behavior. The dog remained at the door, staring intently in the direction of Carmem's house, as if still on alert. 20 minutes later, Patricia Santos came running down the snowy trail, still wearing her pajamas under a thick coat. At 19 years old, the young single mother was visibly desperate, her eyes red from crying. "My son! Where is my son?" she shouted before even entering the house. "He's fine, my dear. He's sleeping." Maria handed Pedro into Patricia's arms, who immediately hugged him tightly to her chest. "Thank God," Patricia whispered through tears. I thought someone had taken him." Carmem, a 65-year-old lady with graying hair tied in a bun, came in right behind her granddaughter, breathing heavily from the hurried walk in the snow. "Maria, I need to understand what happened. How did Pedro end up here?" Maria told the whole story, from Lua's strange behavior to finding the baby in the makeshift sled. As she spoke, she saw the expression of confusion growing on the 2 women's faces. "A sled?" Patricia shook her head. "That doesn't make sense. Pedro was in his crib when I went to sleep. I'm absolutely sure." "And you locked all the doors?" asked Maria. "Of course I did. I always do. I live alone with him. I can't be careless." Carmen walked over to the window and watched Lua, who remained on alert. "That dog of yours has always been odd, Maria. I remember when she was a puppy, always sniffing at things no one else could see." "Lua led me to Pedro," Maria defended the dog. If it weren't for her, who knows what might have happened to the child? Patricia gently rocked her son, trying to process the situation. But I don't understand how he got out of the house. The door was locked from the inside when I woke up. The windows too. A heavy silence fell over the kitchen. The three women exchanged glances, each trying to find a logical explanation for the inexplicable. "Patricia," Maria spoke slowly, "are you sure you didn't leave the house during the night? Sometimes when we're very tired—" "I'm absolutely sure," Patricia interrupted firmly. "I haven't been sleeping much. Pedro is on a feeding schedule every 3 hours. The last time was at 2 in the morning. After that, I slept straight through until 6. Carmen approached her granddaughter and placed a hand on her forehead. "You don't have a fever, you don't seem sick. But honey, there has to be an explanation. Babies don't leave the house on their own." Maria poured hot coffee for the three of them and cut slices of cornbread she had made the day before. The atmosphere was tense, despite the relief that Pedro was safe. "Let's think calmly," said Maria, taking on the mediator role she had always played in the community. "What time exactly did you check the crib, Patricia?" "He fed at 2 in the morning. Then at 5:30 I woke up to use the bathroom. I looked at the crib and he wasn't there. That's when I started screaming." "And Lua woke me up around 5:40, Maria added. "That means Pedro was alone for at most 10 minutes. Carmen shook her head, still skeptical. 10 minutes is enough time for someone to enter the house, take the child and leave. But who would do such a thing? And why would they leave the baby along the way? Patricia hugged Pedro tighter, as if afraid he might disappear again. Maybe it was some crazy person who had a change of heart. Or who got scared by the blizzard. No, Maria shook her head determinedly. A kidnapper wouldn't improvise a sled to protect the child from the cold, and they wouldn't leave him where he could easily be found. Maria's observation made sense to everyone. A criminal certainly wouldn't worry about the victim's well-being. "So what do you think happened?" asked Patricia, her voice trembling. Before anyone could answer, Lua started barking outside. A different bark, sharper, as if calling attention to something specific. Maria stood up and went to the window. On the dirt road connecting the two properties, she could see a figure walking slowly toward her house. "Someone's coming," she announced. The three women went to the front door. The figure was approaching with difficulty, struggling against the snow that reached up to his knees. It was a tall man, wearing a dark coat and a wool hat. "It's Antonio," said Carmen, recognizing her brother-in-law. "What's he doing here so early?" Antonio Ferreira, 45 years old, was a mechanic in town and lived alone in a small house a few kilometers away. It wasn't common to see him around those parts, especially on a blizzard day. When he finally reached the door, Antonio was out of breath, his face red from the cold. "Carmen, thank God I found you," he said, removing his hat to reveal messy brown hair. "I need to talk to you. It's about last night." "Come in, man. You'll freeze to death out there." Maria invited him inside. Antonio entered the kitchen and greeted the three women with a nod. His eyes, however, immediately fixed on the baby in Patricia's arms. "Is that Pedro?" he asked, with a strange look on his face. "Yes," Patricia replied, suspicious. "Why?" Antonio took off his coat and sank heavily into one of the chairs around the wooden table. "I need to tell you something. Last night, around 4 in the morning, I was coming back from town. I'd gone to pick up a part to fix Mr. Joaquim's tractor. And?" Carmen crossed her arms, impatient. "I saw a woman walking on the road, alone in the middle of the blizzard. She was carrying something in her arms." The silence that followed was deafening. Patricia instinctively held Pedro tighter against her chest. "What woman?" asked Maria. "I couldn't see her face clearly because of the snow. But she was walking toward your house, Carmen. I thought it was Patricia, so I didn't stop to offer a ride." "I never left the house," Patricia exclaimed. "I've said it 1,000 times." Antonio looked at her with a confused expression. "But she was about your size, and she was carrying a baby wrapped in a blue blanket." The women exchanged glances. The description perfectly matched the blanket Pedro was wrapped in when Maria found him. "Antonio," Carmen said slowly, "are you sure it was a woman?" "Absolutely. By the way she walked, her posture. Definitely a young woman." "And which direction exactly was she going?" Maria insisted. She was coming from your house, Carmen, and heading toward the creek. I thought it was strange, but with this blizzard, I figured she had some urgent reason. Patricia was growing paler by the second. That's impossible. I didn't leave the house. I don't remember leaving. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like the video and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us out as we're just getting started. Now back to the story. Carmen approached her granddaughter and placed both hands on her shoulders. Patricia, think carefully. Did you take any medicine yesterday? Drink anything? Have you been sleeping well? Just the headache medicine you gave me before bed, the one you bought at the town pharmacy. Maria and Carmen quickly glanced at each other. A flash of understanding passed between the two older women. What medicine was that, Carmen? Maria asked carefully. It was a sedative. The pharmacist said it would help her sleep better. Patricia has been very stressed since Pedro's father disappeared. But what kind of sedative? Maria pressed. Carmen went to her bag and pulled out a small medicine box. Maria took the box and read the name on the label. Carmen, this is a sleeping pill, a very strong one. It says here it can cause sleepwalking in some people. Patricia's blood ran cold. Sleepwalking? You think that I went out walking in my sleep? Antonio nodded in confirmation. It makes sense. The woman I saw was walking strangely, kind of mechanical. I thought it was because of the cold and the snow. But why would I take Pedro with me? Patricia was beginning to panic. And why would I make a sled? Maria moved closer to her and spoke softly. Patricia, you said you've been very worried about Pedro. Maybe in your subconscious you were trying to protect him from something. Protect him from what? I don't know, dear. Only you can tell us that. Patricia began to cry silently as she rocked Pedro in her arms. I've been having nightmares. I dream that someone will take him away from me, that they'll say I'm too young, that I don't know how to care for him properly. Carmen hugged her granddaughter affectionately. No one is going to take Pedro from you, my dear. You are a wonderful mother. But what if I hurt him by accident? Patricia sobbed. What if I do something crazy in my sleep? Maria sat down beside her and took her free hand. First, we're stopping this medication. Second, you won't sleep alone anymore. You'll stay at your grandmother's house for a few days until you feel better. But what if it happens again? It won't happen, said Antonio, surprising everyone. Because I'll keep an eye out. They all looked at him in surprise. What do you mean? Asked Carmen. I'll sleep in the shed on your property for a few nights. If Patricia sleepwalks, I'll be there to accompany her and make sure she and Pedro stay safe. Patricia looked at him with gratitude. You would really do that? Of course. Your family. Maria felt a pang in her heart. There was something in Antonio's voice that suggested more than simple family concern. Antonio, she said carefully, can I ask an indiscreet question? Of course. Do you have a special interest in looking after Patricia? The man blushed slightly but didn't look away. I do, I always have. But I never said anything because of the age difference and because she was with Pedro's father. Patricia looked at him in surprise. You like me? Very much. For years, but I never thought I had a chance. An awkward silence settled in the kitchen. Carmen was the first to speak. Well, that explains why you've been around our property so much lately. I just wanted to make sure you were all okay, especially after Rodrigo vanished. Patricia looked down. Rodrigo was Pedro's father, a 20-year-old who had disappeared when he learned of the pregnancy. He was never heard from again. Antonio, she said slowly, I need to focus on Pedro right now. I'm not ready to think about a relationship. I know I'm not asking for anything, I just want to help. Maria watched the interaction between the two with interest. There was a sincerity in Antonio's voice that impressed her. All right, she said, taking control of the situation again. Let's get things organized. Patricia, you and Pedro will stay at Carmen's house for a week. Antonio, you can sleep in the shed if you want, and we'll all keep an eye out to see if there are any more episodes. What about Lua? Asked Patricia, looking at the dog who was still standing guard at the door. Lua goes too, Maria decided. She clearly has a special instinct to protect Pedro. As if understanding the conversation, Lua wagged her tail and moved closer to Patricia. The baby opened his little eyes and looked at the dog, giving a small smile. "Look at that," whispered Carmen. "It seems they have a special bond." For the rest of the morning, the 3 generations of women organized Patricia's temporary move to Carmen's house. Antonio helped by carrying the crib and the baby's clothes. In the afternoon, when the snow began to let up, Maria returned home, but she couldn't get the story out of her head. There was something that still didn't make sense. If Patricia was under the influence of a sleeping pill, how did she manage to improvise a sled? And where did she get the planks and the rope? Determined to clarify the matter, Maria put on her thickest coat and went out to examine the spot where she had found Pedro. Lua accompanied her, as she always did. Near the bridge, she found the remains of the improvised sled. They were 3 old planks tied together with clothesline rope. Maria recognized the planks immediately. They were from the chicken coop that Carmen had taken apart the previous month. This meant that Patricia, even while asleep, went to Carmen's shed, got the planks stored there, found rope from somewhere, and assembled the sled before placing Pedro on it. It was a level of coordination far too elaborate for someone in a state of sleepwalking. Maria returned home even more confused than before. There was something not being told right. That night, Carmen called to report that Patricia had slept normally, with no sleepwalking episodes. Pedro also slept through the night. "And Antonio?" asked Maria. "Slept in the shed as promised. He was up early in the morning helping feed the chickens." "Carmen, can I ask you something? Where could Patricia have gotten the rope she used on the sled?" "Rope? Oh, it must have been from the clothesline I took down last week. It was stored in the same place as the chicken coop boards." "And did Patricia know those things were there?" "Of course. She helped me put everything away herself." This did not ease Maria's confusion. In fact, it only increased it. On the second day, Patricia again slept without incident. But on the third night, Antonio woke to the sound of footsteps in the yard. When he left the shed to check, he found Patricia walking slowly toward the creek. She was carrying Pedro in her arms and seemed to be asleep. "Patricia," he called softly, so as not to startle her. She didn't respond, continuing her mechanical walk. Antonio followed at a safe distance. To his surprise, Patricia walked directly to the spot where the sled had been found. There, she crouched down and carefully placed Pedro on the ground, on the blanket. Then she began searching for something in the snow. Antonio realized she was trying to rebuild the sled, asleep, but with impressive precision she found fallen branches and tried to tie them together with blades of grass. When she couldn't make the binding work, she began to cry. Still asleep, tears streamed down Patricia's face. "I need to take him to a safe place," she whispered softly. "I need to protect my son." Antonio approached with extreme caution. "Patricia, it's okay. Pedro is safe." She looked at him, but her eyes were empty, without recognition. "You won't take my son," she said in a cold voice. "No one will take him." "I won't take him. I promise. But it's cold here. Shall we go back home?" Patricia stared at him for a long moment, as if assessing whether she could trust him. "Do you promise you won't let anyone take him?" "I promise." She picked up Pedro and began walking back to the house. Antonio accompanied her, staying close in case she stumbled. In the morning, Patricia remembered nothing. "Did it happen again?" she asked, worried. "It did," Antonio confirmed, "but this time I was there. You and Pedro were safe." "Thank you," she said with tears in her eyes. "I don't know what would become of us without you." Antonio felt his heart tighten. With each passing day, his desire to protect Patricia and Pedro grew. Carmen suggested they take Patricia to the town doctor for a more detailed evaluation. Dr. Henrique Santos, a 60-year-old man with decades of experience, examined the young woman carefully. "Sleepwalking episodes are usually caused by extreme stress," he explained. "Patricia is under a lot of pressure as a single mother and still very young." "But doctor," Carmen interjected, "she acts in a very specific way while asleep. It seems like she's trying to protect the baby from some threat." It's the maternal instinct manifesting through the subconscious. She probably feels she needs to protect her son, but can't process that anxiety consciously. "What can we do?" asked Antonio. "First, completely eliminate any medication that might intensify the sleepwalking. Second, reduce the sources of stress in her life. And third, consider some kind of therapy to help her deal with the fears." "Therapy here in town?" Maria asked. "There's a new psychologist, Dr. Fernanda, a specialist in postpartum issues. I think she can help." Back at the farm, the three women talked about the doctor's recommendations. "We don't have money for a psychologist," Patricia said dejectedly. "I'll pay," Antonio offered immediately. "I can't accept that. You're already doing too much." "Patricia," Antonio knelt in front of her, "let me take care of you. Not as a boyfriend or a husband, just as family. As someone who cares." Patricia looked into his eyes for a long moment. "Why do you care so much about us?" Antonio took a deep breath before answering. "Because when I look at you, I see a brave woman doing the best she can in a difficult situation. And when I look at Pedro, I feel like he's my son too." "Antonio, you don't have to say anything right now, just accept the help." Maria watched the conversation with a discreet smile. She was starting to suspect Antonio would be a permanent presence in Patricia and Pedro's life. The first session with Dr. Fernanda was revealing. The psychologist, a 35-year-old woman with a maternal manner, got Patricia to talk about fears she didn't even know she had. "I'm afraid I'm not good enough," Patricia confessed. "Afraid that Pedro will grow up and hate me for having to grow up without a father." "And how does that fear show itself?" asked the doctor. "As paranoia that they'll take him away from me. I dream that social workers show up at my door and say I'm too young, too irresponsible. Patricia, have you ever been in a situation where someone questioned your ability as a mother?" Patricia hesitated before answering. "Yes, at the hospital when Pedro was born. A nurse said to another that girls who are too young shouldn't have children. They thought I didn't hear, but I did. And how did that make you feel? Like I had to prove all the time that I'm a good mother, like any mistake would confirm they were right." Dr. Fernanda wrote something in her notebook. "The sleepwalking episodes might be related to this pressure you put on yourself. Your subconscious is always in protection mode." "How can I stop it?" "First, by recognizing that you don't need to be perfect. Second, by accepting help when it's offered. Third, by working on your self-esteem and confidence as a mother." In the following weeks, Patricia continued sleeping at Carmen's house, with Antonio keeping watch in the shed. The sleepwalking episodes gradually decreased. Lua remained Pedro's faithful companion, sleeping beside the crib every night. The dog seemed to have developed a supernatural instinct for predicting when Patricia was agitated. One night, Lua started whining 2 hours before Patricia had an episode. Antonio, alerted by the dog's behavior, managed to intercept Patricia before she left the house. "She's better than any security system," he commented to Maria. "Lua has always been special," Maria agreed. "My late husband used to say she had a sixth sense." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. As time passed, Antonio became a constant presence in Patricia and Pedro's life. He helped with household chores, played with the baby, and offered emotional support without pressing for anything in return. Patricia began to trust him more and more. "You don't have to do all this," she said one afternoon, watching him assemble a playpen for Pedro. "I know I don't have to. I want to." "But why? What do you get out of it?" Antonio stopped working and looked at her. "I get a family. I get purpose. I get the chance to love someone who deserves to be loved. I have baggage, Antonio. I have a son. I have problems." "Everyone has baggage, Patricia. The difference is, some people are willing to carry each other's baggage." Those words touched Patricia deeply. For the first time since Pedro was born, she allowed herself to imagine a different future. If one day we were really together," she said hesitantly, "would you treat Pedro as your son?" "I already do," Antonio replied simply. "And if one day you truly accept me into the family, I want to legally adopt him." Patricia felt her eyes fill with tears. "You say that now, but what if you get tired? What if you meet someone without complications?" "Patricia, look at me. I won't get tired. I won't find anyone better because there isn't anyone better. You and Pedro are my chosen family." That night, Patricia slept without a single sleepwalking episode. It was the first completely peaceful night in weeks. The next morning, she woke up feeling different, lighter, more hopeful. "Grandma Carmen," she said during breakfast, "I think I'm falling in love with Antonio." Carmen smiled. "It's about time you noticed, my dear. Anyone can see you two were made for each other. But what if it goes wrong? What if it goes right?" Carmen countered. "My granddaughter, you can't spend your whole life afraid of being happy." Patricia spent the day thinking about her grandmother's words. In the afternoon, when Antonio returned from work, she was waiting for him on the porch with Pedro in her arms. "Antonio, I need to talk to you." "Of course. Did something happen?" "Yes. I realized something important." "What?" "I realized you're not just here to help anymore. You're here because this is your home too." Antonio sat beside her on the porch bench. "And how do you feel about that?" "I feel grateful and happy and scared." "Scared of what?" "Scared of ruining everything. Scared of not knowing how to be a girlfriend and a mother at the same time." Antonio carefully took her hand. "Patricia, there's no manual for this. We'll learn together. Are you sure you want a life like this? With diapers, sleepless nights, worries? I want the life that comes with you two, whatever it looks like." Patricia looked at Pedro, who was sleeping peacefully in her arms. The baby had seemed calmer since Antonio became a constant presence. "Okay," she said finally, "but on one condition." "What?" "If one day you get tired of us, you have to tell the truth. You can't just disappear like Pedro's father did." "I promise. But that will never happen." They sealed the agreement with a gentle kiss, while Pedro slept between them. Lua, lying at their feet, sighed contentedly, as if she knew her mission to protect the family was complete. 2 months later, Patricia had no more sleepwalking episodes. Her sessions with Dr. Fernanda helped her process her fears and develop confidence as a mother. Antonio made his move to Carmen's property official, building an addition to the house to accommodate the new family that was forming. Pedro grew up healthy and happy, always accompanied by Lua, who became his inseparable companion. Maria visited the family often, happy to have helped unite the people she loved. The story of the baby found in the snow became a local legend, told as an example of how love can overcome any difficulty. One spring afternoon, exactly 1 year after the snow incident, Antonio asked Patricia to marry him. He proposed in the same spot where Lua had found Pedro, now transformed into a small garden with flowers planted by the whole family. "Patricia Santos," he said, kneeling on the grass, "will you marry me and let me be Pedro's father officially?" "I will," she replied without hesitation. "But only if Lua is our maid of honor." Everyone laughed, including Pedro, who at 1.5 years was babbling words and calling Antonio Daddy. The wedding was celebrated in the town church, with the entire community present. Maria was Patricia's godmother, Carmen was in charge of carrying the rings, and Lua, adorned with a flower collar, truly played the role of the maid of honor. During the ceremony, Pedro sat on Antonio's lap, who held him with the ease of a biological father. "With this union," said the priest, "a family is formed not just by blood, but by love and mutual dedication." After the party, while the guests danced in the community hall, Maria approached Lua and whispered, "Thank you, girl. If it weren't for you on that snowy morning, this story could have had a very different ending." Lua wagged her tail, as if she understood perfectly. On their honeymoon, which consisted of a week at an inn in the mountains of Rio Grande do Sul, Patricia and Antonio took Pedro and Lua. They didn't want to be away from the family they had fought so hard to create. One night, as Pedro slept between them in the inn's bed, Patricia asked, "Do you think we would have met anyway, even without the sleepwalking episodes?" "I think so," Antonio replied. "But maybe it would have taken longer. The episodes forced us to really get to know each other quickly." It's strange to think that something that scared me so much in the end was what brought us together. Sometimes problems are just blessings in disguise. 2 years later, Patricia gave birth to a girl they named Luna, in honor of the dog that changed their lives. Pedro, now almost 4 years old, helped take care of his little sister with the affection of a natural protector. Lua, now 10 years old, still kept watch over the children, but now shared the responsibility with Pedro, who had inherited her protective instinct. The family lived in a harmony that seemed unlikely 2 years before. Antonio had legally adopted Pedro, and the boy grew up knowing he had a father who had chosen him out of love. Patricia became a confident and secure mother, helping other young mothers in the area who were going through similar difficulties. Carmen found fulfillment in her role as a great-grandmother, dividing her time between caring for her great-grandchildren and managing the property that now housed 3 generations of the family. Maria continued to be everyone's wise counselor, always ready to offer hot coffee and wisdom accumulated over decades of life. The sessions with Dr. Fernanda turned into monthly maintenance meetings, where Patricia learned techniques to deal with the stress of modern life without repressing it in her subconscious. The episode of the baby in the snow became a milestone in the lives of all involved. Patricia kept the blue blanket that wrapped Pedro that morning as a family relic. During winter nights, when the family gathered around the fireplace, the children always asked to hear the story of how Pedro was saved by the good wolf. "Tell it again, Mom," Pedro would ask. "Tell how Lua brought me home." And Patricia would tell it, always emphasizing that Lua wasn't just a dog, but a 4-legged angel sent to protect their family. The story spread throughout the region, inspiring other families to value the signs of love and protection they received daily. Maria, at 75, became a kind of matriarch of the community, always receiving people who sought advice for family problems. "The secret," she would say, "is to never give up on those you love. Even when they do things you don't understand, there's always a reason behind it." Antonio grew professionally, expanding his workshop and hiring 2 assistants. The financial success allowed him to give the children all the opportunities he hadn't had in his own childhood. Patricia returned to studying, taking a correspondence nursing course. She wanted to help other families like hers had been helped. Pedro grew up strong and intelligent, always accompanied by Luna, his sister, and Lua, the dog. People in the region remarked that they had never seen a child so affectionate and protective of his family. Luna developed a sweet and observant personality, inheriting from her mother the ability to sense when someone needed extra care. Carmen's property transformed into a gathering place for the entire extended family. Sundays became sacred, with lunches that brought 3 generations together around the large table Antonio had built in the backyard. During these gatherings, the children played under Lua's supervision, while the adults shared the week's news. Maria began writing the family's stories in a notebook, so future generations would know where they came from and how love can overcome any obstacle. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to leave a like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot, as we're just starting out. Now continuing. A special event marked the 3rd anniversary of the snow rescue, the arrival of a new family member. Carmen, at 68, met João, a 70-year-old widower who had moved to the area. João was retired, kind, and was immediately enchanted by the family dynamic he found on the property. "I've never seen a family so close-knit," he commented to Carmen during a visit. "It's inspiring." "We've learned that family isn't just about blood," she replied. "It's a daily choice to love each other despite the difficulties." João integrated naturally into the group, helping Antonio with repairs on the property and telling stories to the children. Pedro and Luna immediately adopted him as Grandpa João, and Lua, now elderly but still watchful, approved of his presence with enthusiastic tail wags. 6 months later, Carmen and João announced they were getting married. "At our age," Patricia joked, "Grandma, don't you think you're too old for romance?" "My dear, as long as the heart beats, there's time for love," Carmen replied with a mischievous smile. The family's 2nd wedding was even more emotional than the first. Carmen wore a light blue dress, a color that had become a symbol of luck for the family, and João wore his best suit. Pedro was the ring bearer, Luna was the flower girl, and Lua, now 11 years old and moving more slowly, still participated in the ceremony lying at the foot of the altar. The celebration was held at the property itself, decorated with flowers the family had planted during the 3 years of emotional rebuilding. During the newlyweds' dance, João whispered in Carmen's ear, "Thank you for letting me be part of this amazing family." "Thank you for choosing us too," she replied. That night, 5 different generations slept under the same roof for the first time. João and Carmen, Maria, who decided to sleep at the house to help with the celebration, Patricia and Antonio, Pedro and Luna, and Lua, who, even old, never abandoned her guard duty. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone. That house, which 3 years earlier had sheltered only Carmen and occasionally Patricia with Pedro, was now home to a multi-generational family united by genuine love. In the following months, the family's routine adjusted to accommodate João. He took on some responsibilities for the property, allowing Antonio to dedicate more time to growing his business. Maria, now 76, reduced her activities, but continued to be the wise counselor for everyone. Her daily visits became anticipated moments, especially by the children. Pedro, at 5 years old, started attending the town school. He was a popular child, known for defending the younger classmates and always sharing his snacks. "He's just like his father," the teacher would comment to Patricia. "He has a generous heart." "Which father?" Pedro would ask whenever he heard these comparisons. "Antonio, of course," Patricia would reply. "He is your real father." Pedro assimilated this truth perfectly. For him, a father was the one who was present, who played with him, who helped with homework, and who gave him a hug in difficult moments. At 2 years old, Luna was already showing a determined and affectionate personality. She followed Pedro everywhere, copying his gestures and words. Lua, despite her advanced age, still took her role as protector seriously. When the children played in the backyard, she would position herself strategically to watch every move. One afternoon, Lua stopped Pedro from getting close to a snake that had hidden near the chicken coop. The dog barked insistently until the adults came to investigate and removed the reptile. "She's still saving us," Patricia observed, stroking the dog's graying fur. "Lua is our special guardian," Pedro agreed. "She's going to take care of us forever." Unfortunately, Lua's forever was coming to an end. At 12 years old, she began to show clear signs that she was saying goodbye. The family gathered to talk about how to help the dog in her final days. "We want her to be happy until the end," Antonio said. "No unnecessary suffering." "She deserves to pass with dignity," Patricia added, surrounded by the family she protected. Pedro, even though he was a child, understood the seriousness of the situation. "Is Lua getting old like great-grandma Maria?" he asked. "Yes, son," Patricia replied carefully. "All living things get old one day." "But will Lua go to heaven? Will she become a star?" "Turning into a star is a beautiful way to think about it," Antonio said, hugging the boy. Luna, still too young to fully understand, only knew that Lua was getting more affection than usual. In Lua's final days, the family arranged things so she would never be alone. They made a special bed for her in the living room, where she could watch all the comings and goings of the house. Pedro spent hours telling stories to Lua, repeating the adventures they had shared. "Remember when you found me in the snow?" he would say, stroking her head. "You were so brave." Lua looked at him with eyes that were still bright, as if she understood every word. On her last day, Lua asked to go out into the backyard one final time. With difficulty, she walked to the spot where the sled had been found years before, now a flower garden. There she lay down in the afternoon sun and closed her eyes peacefully. The whole family was present. Pedro and Luna said goodbye with kisses and gentle pets. The adults expressed their gratitude in soft words. Lua passed as she had lived, protecting her family until the very last moment, choosing the place and time to avoid causing unnecessary suffering. Lua's funeral was touching. The family buried the dog in the garden where she had chosen to say goodbye, planting a white rose bush in her honor. Pedro drew a picture of Lua with angel wings to place on the makeshift grave. "Now she can protect us from heaven," he said, with the simple wisdom of children. The following weeks were about adjusting to life without Lua. The house seemed quieter, less protected, but the family had learned to find comfort in each other. Pedro took on some of Lua's responsibilities, like checking if the doors were locked before bed. Luna, even though she was little, seemed to feel her companion's absence and developed a habit of looking at the sky as if searching for someone. Maria suggested they do a gratitude ritual whenever they missed Lua. "Instead of crying because she's gone," she explained, "let's be thankful that she lived with us." The idea worked especially well with the children, who turned their longing into a celebration of happy memories. 6 months after Lua's passing, João brought a surprise for the family, a German Shepherd puppy that looked like a miniature version of their beloved dog. "It's not to replace Lua," he explained. "It's to honor her memory by continuing the family tradition of protection." Pedro was enchanted by the puppy, who immediately showed the same protective instinct as her predecessor. "Let's call her Star," Pedro decided, "because the moon turned into a star, and now Star will take care of us." Star grew up hearing stories about Moon and seemed to inherit not only the instincts, but also a special affection for the family. The first snowstorm after Star's arrival was a moving moment. Pedro, now 6 years old, took the young dog to the garden where Moon was buried. "Look, Star," he said, "this is where it all began. Moon brought me home when I was a baby, and now you will protect Luna, the sister, too." Star sniffed the spot with interest, as if absorbing important information about her mission. That night, she slept for the first time beside Luna's crib, officially taking on the role of the family's protector. Patricia watched the scene with tears in her eyes. "It's as if Moon sent a replacement," she commented to Antonio. "Maybe she really did," he replied. "Who are we to fully understand how love works?" The following years brought growth and prosperity for the whole family. The property expanded with the construction of a new wing to accommodate the growing family. Pedro became an exemplary boy at school, known for his intelligence and kindness. Teachers remarked that they had rarely seen a child so emotionally balanced. Luna developed an artistic personality, always drawing and singing. Her favorite artworks always included dogs with angel wings. Antonio expanded his business, opening a second workshop in the neighboring town. Financial success allowed the family to travel and provide broad educational opportunities for the children. Patricia graduated as a nurse and began working at the town clinic, specializing in care for young mothers. Her personal story made her especially empathetic to patients going through similar difficulties. Carmen and João established themselves as the most beloved couple in the community, always willing to help neighbors in need. Maria, at 80 years old, published a book of memoirs about the region, including the story of the family that came together through a snowstorm and a special dog. The book became popular in the region, inspiring other families to value difficult moments as opportunities for growth. During the book launch at the town library, Maria dedicated a chapter especially to Moon and Star. "This story teaches us that true love knows no species," she told the moved audience. "An animal can be the instrument God uses to unite a family." The story gained attention when a radio station from the capital decided to do a special program about non-traditional families that succeeded. The interview with the family aired on a Sunday afternoon, reaching thousands of listeners across the state. "Our main message," said Patricia during the interview, "is that family is built with love, patience, and a willingness to overcome obstacles together. And that sometimes," added Pedro, now 8 years old, "problems are just blessings in disguise." Pedro's phrase, repeating words he had heard from Antonio years before, moved the listeners and went viral on the region's social media. Letters arrived from various parts of the country, from people inspired by the story to resolve their own family conflicts. One especially touching letter came from a single mother in São Paulo who managed to overcome her postpartum depression after hearing Patricia's story. "You showed me that it's possible to rebuild life even when everything seems lost," she wrote. The family decided to personally respond to each letter received, turning their experience into a source of hope for others. Even as children, Pedro and Luna participated by writing little letters to the children who wrote to them. Estrela became a sort of family mascot, always present in the photos they sent back with their replies. The dog showed the same special instinct as Lua had for sensing when someone needed extra care. During a visit from a family who had come to meet them in person, Estrella approached an autistic child who was having difficulty communicating. The dog lay down beside the boy and stayed there until he calmed down and began to interact with others. "It's amazing," the child's mother remarked. "I've never seen my son calm down so quickly with a stranger." "We're not strangers," Pedro said simply. "We're family to everyone who needs love." This philosophy became the family's unofficial motto: to be family to everyone who needs love. The property gradually transformed into a gathering place for people seeking hope and inspiration. Carmen and João organized a support group for couples facing challenges raising children or grandchildren. Patricia started a volunteer mentoring program for teenage mothers. Antonio offered free mechanics courses for young people without job opportunities. Maria became the official storyteller for children in the area, always emphasizing family values and perseverance. Pedro and Luna grew up immersed in this environment of solidarity, developing a sense of social responsibility from an early age. On the 10th anniversary of the snow rescue, the family organized a special party to celebrate not just the event, but the entire journey of growth that followed. The garden where Lua was buried became a small memorial, decorated with flowers and photos of all the family's special moments. Estrella, now 4 years old, seemed to understand the solemnity of the moment and remained quiet throughout the ceremony. Pedro, at 10 years old, gave a moving speech. 10 years ago, I was a baby who needed protection. Today, I am a boy who wants to protect others. That's what families do. They protect each other and protect those who need it most. Luna, at 8 years old, recited a poem she had written about Lua and Estrella. Two four-legged guardians, one in the sky, one on earth, protecting our family, like soldiers in a war. War against sadness, war against fear, war against loneliness, that hurts so early. Lua became a star. Estrella is our Lua. Love changes form, but it never acts. The poem left everyone emotional, especially Maria, who saw in Luna's creativity a continuation of her own tradition of preserving memories through words. During the party, a special surprise arrived: Dr. Fernanda, the psychologist who had helped Patricia years before. "I couldn't miss this celebration," she said, hugging Patricia. "You are one of my most cherished success stories." "Doctor, you changed our lives," Patricia replied. "If it weren't for the therapy—" "The work was all yours, Patricia. I just offered the tools. You had the courage to use them." "Doctor." Fernanda's presence reinforced for everyone the importance of professional support in difficult times. She took the opportunity to meet Pedro and Luna, curious to see how the children had developed. "They are exceptionally well-balanced children," she observed to the parents. "Of course, they grew up in an environment of unconditional love." "We tried to give them everything we didn't have," Antonio explained. "Stability, security, but most of all the certainty that they are loved. The result is evident. They radiate confidence and compassion." As the party continued, people from the community arrived to join the celebration. The family's story had become part of the local history. The mayor paid an official visit, announcing that the date would be marked on the municipal calendar as United Family Day. "You are an example for our community," he said during a brief speech. "You show that with love and determination, any obstacle can be overcome." The official tribute moved the whole family, but especially Maria, who at 81 never imagined her small property would become a symbol of hope for an entire town. That evening, when the guests had left, the family gathered in the memorial garden for a private moment of reflection. 10 years, said Carmen, looking at the stars. "It feels like a whole lifetime and just a day at the same time." "It was a whole lifetime," agreed Patricia. "The life we built together." Pedro was lying on the grass looking at the sky. "Mom, do you think the moon is watching our celebration from up there?" "I'm sure she is, son. She must be very proud of how our family has grown." Luna snuggled next to her brother. "Pedro, tell me again how the moon brought you home when you were a baby." Pedro smiled and began the story he knew by heart, but never tired of repeating. Estrella positioned herself between the two children, as if she knew it was her turn to protect the next generation of family tales. The adults watched the scene with hearts full of gratitude. That night marked not just an anniversary, but the consolidation of a family that had chosen to stay united through all difficulties. "You know what I learned?" said Antonio, breaking the contemplative silence. "What?" they all asked almost in unison. "I learned that it doesn't matter how a family begins, it matters how it chooses to continue." "And our family chose to continue with lots of love," added João, hugging Carmen. Maria, the oldest and wisest of the group, offered the final words of the night. "This family began with a mystery in the snow and a brave dog. Today, we are proof that when God wants to bring people together, He uses the most unexpected situations to make it happen." "Amen," they all said in chorus, including Pedro and Luna. Estrella barked once, as if it were her way of saying amen too. That night, everyone slept more peacefully than usual, knowing they were part of something bigger than themselves. A family chosen by the heart, strengthened by hardships, and blessed by unconditional love. The years that followed brought new challenges and joys, but the solid foundation built over that decade prepared them to face any situation together. Pedro grew up and became a veterinarian, inspired by the love he felt for Estrella and the memory of Lua. He specialized in animal-assisted therapy, helping other families discover the same magic he had experienced. Luna followed an artistic path, becoming a children's book illustrator. Her most famous series told stories of animals saving families, directly inspired by her own experience. Antonio and Patricia had 2 more children, who grew up hearing the stories of how the family was formed and developed the same sense of protection and love for their older siblings. Carmen and João became the most beloved grandparents in the region, always willing to care not only for their own grandchildren, but for any child who needed attention and affection. Maria lived to be 95, long enough to see her great-grandchildren begin to form their own families, always carrying the values of unity and compassion she had helped plant. Estrella lived a long and happy life, being the mother of several litters that were given to loving families in the area. Her puppies inherited the same protective instinct, spreading Lua's legacy throughout the community. The story of the family, brought together by a snowstorm and a special dog, continued to inspire people for decades. Books were written, movies were made, and the small property in the mountains of Rio Grande do Sul became a pilgrimage destination for those seeking examples of how love can overcome any obstacle. But for the family members, all the fame and recognition was secondary compared to the treasure that truly mattered. The unconditional love they shared for one another, and the certainty that, no matter what happened, they would always have each other. The blue blanket that wrapped Pedro on that cold July morning was preserved as a family relic, passed down from generation to generation as a symbol of protection and love. And on winter nights, when snow would fall again in the mountains of Rio Grande do Sul, the family would gather around the fireplace to tell once more the story of how a baby lost in the snow became the beginning of a family that chose love as its primary language. The children in the family always asked the same question at the end of the story. What if the moon hadn't found Pedro that morning? And the answer was always the same. But she did. Because some things are destiny, and our family's destiny was to be united by love. End of story. Now tell us what you thought of this touching story and where you're watching from. If something touched your heart, leave your sincere words in the comments. Do you believe love can really overcome any obstacle like it did for this family? We love reading your opinions and experiences. Thank you so much for your company. Don't forget to leave your like and especially subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other heartwarming stories.